Hello and welcome back. I know it's a late video, but here we go anyway. It's my Magicka Templar DPS build for Murkmire. Um, I really like to put a lot of work into my builds, or at least test them and play them a lot before I actually call them finished and feel confident enough to make them into a video. So yeah, I'm to the point where I'm very happy with this build and I'm really confident with how it plays. So here we go. So on the screen you can have a look at the basics, but we're gonna go through the armor and the gear, the skills, the CP, and the random little bits at the end. So let's start off with the armor and gear. So there's two variants for this build. There's a melee, which I prefer playing, and a ranged, and we'll talk about the different gear that is recommended for each one. So the gear I have on right now is the melee, the preferred melee gear. So we've got Zen, 2-piece, Sororia, not perfected yet, 5-piece, Burning Spellweave, 5-piece, and then a Maelstrom Inferno. The traits I use on the head, the chest, and the legs is all infused with Max Magicka. The shoulders, the hands, the belts, and the shoes are all divines, all Max Magicka. Jewellery traits, we got one arcane, one bloodthirsty, and another arcane. 2 infused Inferno staves, one with shock, one with fire. And that's the mainstay gear. Now, there's a few alternatives, so one of the good alternative monster sets I use a lot is Slime Claw. It's for when there's fights which don't get the most use out of Zan, so fights where I can't be melee all the time, or when there's a lot of movement, or when healers can't always give me buffs. So I like using Slime Claw in that case. I also like using Slime Claw for my ranged version of this build. Gear swap out for Sororia would be Master Architect. Let's bring it up, if I can spell it proper. So, Master Architect has the same 2 to 4 piece bonuses as Sororia, but its 5th piece, instead of being spell damage stacking like Sororia, it's Major Slayer every time you use an ult, which is pretty nice. And the Magicka Templar build I have here uses a very cheap backbar ultimate, which is why Master Architect is viable. Anyway, the alternative set for Burning Spellweave is War Maiden. Let's bring it up here. So War Maiden is just a flat 400 spell or magic damage to your magic damage abilities, and quite a lot of them on a Magplar are, which makes it a fairly solid set. It's not as good as Burning Spellweave by any means, but it's a fairly good set and it's very easy to get. So, where you get these sets, you get Zan from Scalecaller, you get Sororia from Cloud Rest, you get Perfected from Veteran +1 Cloud Rest, and Burning Spellweave is from City of Ash. So, my recommendations for farming the easiest way is normal unperfected Sororia you get from normal Cloud Rest. City of Ash 1 normal mode is pretty good for farming just the jewellery and the staff. Sadly, if you want to get Zan, you have to do Veteran Scalecaller, but you can find a good group for that. And the Maelstrom Inferno is possibly the trickiest one to get of the bunch. You have to do Maelstrom, which is a solo arena, and it's fairly time consuming to get, but once you have it, you're pretty much set up. So, alternative gears, you get Slime Claw from Wayrest 1, you get Master Architect from Halls of Fabrication, and you get War Maiden well, you can just buy it from guild stores for next to nothing. It's not particularly expensive. I forget where you farm it, but it's very, very cheap to buy it. So that would be my recommendation on that. Okay, so that's gears and traits and stuff talked about. Let's have a look at skills. So we'll go over our melee skill bar first, then we'll quickly look at our ranged version. So we use puncturing sweeps. So part of the melee build is it's really tanky for a melee build. And here's why. So puncturing sweeps, as I just said, our first skill, heals you whenever you do damage with it. And alongside that, there's a passive with Atrix Spear abilities which gives you minor protection. So every time you use puncturing sweeps, you heal yourself and you get minor protection. So you're very, very tanky. Then we have got Radiant Oppression that Magpies execute. It is really, really strong. Long range, fairly decent cost, and it hits really, really properly hard. And it is fantastic. It's been sped up since Murkmire, so it's no longer quite the pain in the ass to channel like it was. Then we've got Vampire's Bane, single target damage over time, but this can also be swapped out for Solar Barrage if you're in AoE circumstances or you just want to get the Empower buff from Solar Barrage. And then another piece of the tankiness puzzle for this build, we got Purifying Light. It basically just saves up a copy of existing damage and then deals it after 6 seconds, and makes a little healing AoE on the feet of whatever you just cast it on after it goes off. Which, for the melee build, you're sitting melee range, so you just have tons of heals coming in from Purifying Light and Puncturing Sweeps. Then we've got Inner Light, which is just a bit more Max Magicka and Major Prophecy. Not too much there. Fiery Rage, we're having this on our front bar to give us the Destruction Staff, extra single target damage passive, and Fiery Rage is simply the best AoE ultimate there is, and very good and solid for DPS. On our back bar, we've got slot 1, which is usually my flex slot, where either Elemental Drain for like running around solo or doing tests on dummies will be used, or in Maelstrom, Trials, or Dungeons, I'll just swap this out and use Harness Magicka. And the final piece of the puzzle for why this is such a tanky build is Channel Focus. It gives us 5,280 spell and physical resistance, and then 50% extra when you're standing in the rune, and it also gives the majority of the sustain for this build. It does 240 Magicka recovery every 1 second. So this is a must-have skill, it's really cheap, and it lasts a long time. You can't not have this. Okay, then we've got our 2 ground AoE dots. Blazing Spear, recently buffed with Murkmire, and Blockade of Fire, which we're using to get the light attack bonus damage from the Maelstrom Inferno. Then we have Inner Light again. Some people use things that can give you minor force, so Channeled Acceleration or Rearming Trap, but I never ever got used to using those, so I just use this. And then the ultimate I mentioned earlier, the cheap one, Crescent Sweep, only 72 ult, and if you're using Master Architect, then you can have a pretty good uptime using this ultimate, and it deals a fair chunk of damage as well, so best option for your back bar. Okay, so we'll quickly show my ranged skill setup. So all we really do is we just change around these skills. So we move Blazing Spear to the front bar, which gives us the use of Piercing Spear, so we keep the extra 10% critical damage, and we put Elemental Weapon on the front bar as our new single target ranged skill. and Vampire's Bane / Solar Barrage go to the back bar, depending on if you want AoE or single target dots. But that sums up my ranged bars. We're going to go back to my melee bars now, because that's what I like. Okay, so now we're going to look at our CP, real speedy like. Starting with blue, we have 56 in Elfborn, which is for magical critical damage, whatever. And then 64 in Elemental Expert, flat damage, spell erosion for spell penetration. Staff Expert 14, Master at Arms 40, and Thaumaturge 66. Now, for Thaumaturge, Master at Arms, and Staff Expert, if you're going to be running with Elemental Weapon, what I would recommend you do is you change Thaumaturge from 66 to 44, you bump Staff Expert to 19, and Master at Arms to 56. That will give you this Butcher passive, and generally improve your direct damage ability, which is Elemental Weapon. But I'm going to stick with my setup here, because more points in Thaumaturge buffs Puncture and Sweeps, which is what I use, so that's perfectly good for the melee build. Red Tree, it changes between trials, most have their own setups, but here's my generic setup: 66 in Ironclad, 36 in Spell Shield, 30 in Light Armor Focus, 40 in Thick-Skinned, 49 in Hardy and Elemental Defender, nothing in the Lord. Green Tree, we've got 40 in Warlord, 11 in Bashing Focus, this is to help with breaking free and interrupting, 75 in Arcanist and 64 in Tenacity for some sustain, and then 40 in Shadow Ward and Tumbling for more stamina sustain, which is really handy on a Magicka character if you need to be roll dodging or trying not to get killed a lot. So that's the CP. Now we're going to go on to our little details. So race choice, this is my healer, and it's just the character I happen to be recording on, but to be fair, race doesn't make much difference. At most it'll give you 2 to 3k DPS, but it's nothing to really be crazy over, unless you really want to min-max endgame. But optimal race is high elf. This one's my Argonian, she also is my healer. We got Vampire for extra Magicka regen. We use Thief because both Sororia and Burning Spellweave are spell damage stacking sets, so we need the critical from this Mundus. And then we just use normal, max health, max Magicka, blue food. Consumables, just if you want to see them, this is the max health, max Magicka, blue food. If you don't have enough sustain, you could always use Witch Mother's Potent Brew or Clockwork Citrus, and you really don't need the shot glyph on this back bar. I don't know why I still use it, but it could be Berserker or a Absorb Magic glyph on there, whichever you prefer or need. And the last few details of this build are pretty much the passives. Just grab all your class passives, your Destruction Staff, your Light Armor, these ones from Medium Armor. I use all the Heavy Armor ones because I have a Heavy Armor PvP build. The useful ones for Vampire to pick up is this one, Unnatural Resistance, kind of helps with the health recovery problems, Death for more damage reduction, and the actual recovery passive. Mage's Guild, just take all of these if you can. You only need to have Banish the Wicked from Fighter's Guild. Psijic Order, if you use Psijic skills and have the tree leveled up, just grab them all because they're all useful. Don't need Thieves Guild. Undaunted, you need their passives of course. You don't need anything from Alliance War. Grab all your race passives. And the last ones that you really need are medicinal use from alchemy to make your potions last longer. Oh yeah, speaking of the potions are essence of spell power to give you that major sorcery, because there's no way to get it on this build apart from potions. Right, I think that just about sums up everything on this build. So there's going to be a DPS pause coming up in just a second. So thanks for watching, and enjoy looking at the rotation and seeing how much damage this build can do.